It's part history, part horror, and all honor to those who conjure the season of screams. We chronicle the artistry behind horror's favorite holiday. This is Working the Fright Shift.
Clock into Working the Fright Shift, the gateway between imagination and fear, with your host, Ted Doherty.
Welcome to Working the Fright Shift, where every whisper has weight and every hallway echoes with memory. Today we welcome the amazing Dani October, a fear architect who builds terror brick by brick. But first, we map the shadowed terrain in this week's Horror Blueprint.
The Horror Blueprint, the art behind the fear.
What do you consider one of the creepiest, most disturbing subgenres of horror? Well, we all have our different answers, but for me, one of them is certainly cult horror. There's something about these stories that hits a little bit different, don't you think? That fear of losing control, of being sucked into blind devotion, of realizing that belief itself can be terrifying. Whether it's in film, television, or literature, cult horror has shaped some of the most haunting stories in the genre, ones that stick with you long after the credits roll. And if we're talking cult horror, well, we have to start with probably the grandfather of cult horror, 1973's The Wicker Man. This British folk horror classic is essential viewing. It follows Sergeant Howie, a straight-laced, deeply religious police officer who arrives at the remote island of Summer Isle to investigate a missing girl. But what he walks into is way more than he bargained for. A community fully immersed in pagan rituals. And when I say immersed, I mean deeply immersed. Like, this is not just a Harvest Festival level of devotion. And then comes that ending. One of horror's most shocking finales. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, just prepare yourself. The Wicker Man didn't just deliver spine-tingling terror. It really kind of defined folk horror, blending ancient traditions with modern fears. Its influence is everywhere, in movies like Midsommar and The Ritual, proving that cult horror is here to stay. Plus, you've got Christopher Lee in it, who is amazing. Now, some other examples of cult horror, we've got Rosemary's Baby from 1968. If paranoia had a cinematic form, I think it'd be Rosemary's Baby. Roman Polanski's classic takes us deep into the psychological unraveling of Rosemary, a young woman who starts to suspect that her neighbors and even her husband are involved in something sinister. It turns out they're not just nosy old folks. They are part of a satanic cult. And yes, they have plans for Rosemary's unborn child. They're literally grooming her to give birth to the Antichrist. The horror here isn't just the supernatural. It's the slow, creeping realization that she has no one on her side. Then there was Hereditary in 2018. Ari Aster's Hereditary isn't just disturbing, it's devastating. What starts as a messed up family drama slowly morphs into something more calculated. A secret cult has been pulling the strings all along, orchestrating tragedy after tragedy to ensure their dark lord, Payman, gets a new vessel. The way this film spirals into full-blown horror, it's a masterpiece. And if you haven't seen it, buckle up, because that ending is an absolute nightmare. In 2019, there was Midsommar. There was sunshine, flower crowns, and human sacrifices. Midsommar takes its time letting the horror sink in. A group of friends travel to Sweden for a seemingly calm and fun midsummer festival, but of course things go sideways fast. The Harga cult operates on ancient traditions, and those traditions involve some seriously deranged rituals. Elderly members voluntarily ending their lives, gruesome sacrifices, and a deep belief in the cycle of of renewal. It's folk horror with a hypnotic, dreamy quality that makes the horror all the more disturbing. Then in 2015, there was The Invitation, which was a slow burn thriller that thrived on tension. A dinner party turned into something far more sinister when the hosts reveal their true intentions. They are part of a cult that believes in finding peace through death. The slow realization mixed with a claustrophobic setting captured the creeping dread for this one. Then there was The Ritual in 2017. Did you ever wonder what would happen if you got lost in the woods and stumbled onto an ancient Norse cult? Well, The Ritual answers that question in the most terrifying way possible. A group of hikers find themselves trapped in a forest filled with eerie symbols, strange occurrences, and a horrifying entity worshipped by a secretive cult. And let me just say, you don't want to be their next offering. Cult horror isn't just for the big screen. TV has delivered some killer takes on the genre too. American Horror Story Cult in 2017. That season really dug into the psychology of cult leaders, pulling inspiration from real-world figures like Charles Manson and Jim Jones. It explored how cults recruit and manipulate their members, proving that fear and loyalty are two of the most powerful tools a leader can have. Then starting in 2021 and still running as of this recording is Yellow Jackets, a survival horror series that teases cult-like rituals among a stranded girls' soccer team. As desperation takes hold, the group starts embracing bizarre ceremonies, eerie masks, and possibly cannibalism. It's a dark descent into the cult mentality, and it keeps getting more intense every season. Then there was The Path from 2016 through 2018, and that was more like psychological drama than straight-up horror, but The Path explored the inner workings of the fictional Meyerism cult. It delved into how belief can be weaponized, how indoctrination happens over time, and the emotional turmoil of trying to break free. Cult horror works because it taps into real-life fears, manipulation, loss of identity, the dangers of blind faith. The Wicker Man and Midsommar, they challenge our assumptions about tradition and authority, while Hereditary and Rosemary's Baby explore betrayal in the people closest to us. And TV shows like American Horror Story Cult and Yellow Jackets, they take it a step further, unraveling the psychological threads that make cult horror so unnerving. At its core, cult horror isn't just about creepy rituals and unsettling chants. It's about us, about society, about how belief can shape reality, and about the terrifying idea that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are human. So, next time you settle in for a cult horror movie, ask yourself, what would I do if I found myself caught in a cult? The answer might be scarier than the film itself, which is why this subgenre of cult horror has wedged its way into the horror blueprint. Fear isn't just built, it's believed. The horror blueprint reminded us of that. Now we sit with someone who understands the emotional framework behind every scream. Tonight we summon the spirit of Halloween itself. This week's fear architect is the incomparable Dani October, and as you're about to learn, is a living embodiment of Halloween magic. From the shadowed streets of Sleepy Hollow to the storied alleys of Salem, Dani has walked the haunted path with reverence and curiosity. She's a historian and a storyteller whose passion for preserving the legacy of the Salem witch trials is matched only by her love for New England's eerie folklore. Whether she's exploring the streets of Salem or diving into spectral secrets, Dani brings the past to life with chilling clarity. So light your jack-o'-lanterns and prepare to be spellbound because tonight we are unlocking the haunted heartbeat of Dani October.
Fear Architects, crafting worlds of terror.
Welcome to Working the Fright Shift, Dani. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
Oh, wonderful. I'm happy that you're here. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm actually calling in from New Hampshire, where I go to once in a while. My boyfriend lives in New Hampshire. He's a very cool office down here. We have all sorts of see, the jacket behind me is Ray Bradbury's jacket, just as spooky as I am. So it's definitely a spooky atmosphere going on down here.
Oh, he sounds like my kind of person. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Dani, I have questions for you. Are you ready?
I have answers. Let's do it.
Okay, well, first up, what first sparked your deep love for Halloween and how has it evolved over the years?
Yeah, so I think like most of us Halloweeniacs as adults, like we were strange kids, right? I was not the typical, I was kind of like a Wednesday Addams type of child, like as everyone else is playing with Barbies. I'm walking around like bookstores or graveyards or that sort of thing. So it was really just a thing of Halloween and the spooky season in October feeling like the only time where I felt normal. And I loved it so much as a child because it's kind of like when the rest of the world caught up with me, so to speak. And as I grew older, it wasn't really until the introduction of like social media that I started realizing, like, oh, there's so many other people out there and sparked this huge community of Halloweeniacs and spooky lovers. And it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And just realizing places like Salem exist and Sleepy Hollow exist, and I can go to these places and I can venture out and do these things that it just became so much part of my personality that it just grew to so much more of a love beyond just like a childhood whim. But it definitely started when I was a kid for sure.
I love the word Halloweeniacs. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, Halloween. That's definitely what I am. Definitely what a lot of us are. I was happy to like when MySpace first started and I saw those first few Halloween pages, I was like, this is incredible. Like these are people that are like me, that we embrace it year round, but like no one else really does, right?
Right.
And now it seems like we are such a large community. I can't even imagine a time when this did not exist?
I know. Now, you have lived in both Sleepy Hollow and Salem,
Yeah.
two iconic Halloween towns. How did each shape your personal connection to the season?
Yeah, so I think, you know, back in the day, so I was born and raised in Brooklyn. And then Halloween would come and go, and it was kind of like this thing that you waited for all year. But it wasn't until I moved to Sleepy Hollow and especially Salem that it just took that whole thing to the next level. It took my whole Halloween life to the next level. I was able to like exist in kind of like a Halloween suspended state throughout the year. You didn't have to wait for it to happen. I mean, I think the first time I moved to Sleepy Hollow, I went to the supermarket and I literally saw the Headless Horseman walking around because they were doing like a photo shoot. But I was like, I can't believe I get to live in a place like this. And to see like little witch icons on the ambulances and the police cars or Headless Horsemen's, I'm like, oh, this can be like all the time now. And I think my love and enthusiasm for Halloween and everything spooky kind of like rubs off on other people. So like I started bringing my family into it and my friends into it, and they started to come to visit me. And when spooky season rolls around, what's Dani gonna do? Like, what does she have planned this year? So it's really like it just spread across the board, like family, friends, lifestyle. And living in these towns has just like transcended my love for Halloween, because it's just an everyday experience here, especially in Salem, especially in Salem.
What does Halloween in general mean to you on a spiritual or emotional level?
It's definitely, and I think this is true for a lot of us. It's like when we come alive, right? You kind of just exist throughout the year. But then, like today, we woke up this morning, it's about 60 degrees. You start to feel, right? That like it's starting. I don't know if you get that in California, like it doesn't get very, like, I don't know how
No.
you live without autumn. I don't know how anyone does it. But that first like click of the seasons and that changing, of the weather and the leaves, it just completely uplifts me. And just like emotionally, there's just nothing like there's absolutely nothing like walking around Salem in the fall with the leaves falling and the sights and the sounds of Salem and the music and the smells and the costumes and like little screams here and there from people getting scared by monsters on the street. It's the happiest time of it's the most wonderful time of the year, right? Like that's what people say. So really just uplifts me like no other time for sure.
This is all music to my
Yeah,
ears.
I know. I could tell. I could tell just talking to you. You wish you were here right now, don't you?
Yeah, I think most folks listening to this in areas outside of where you are at are probably wishing we could just pack our bags and go and hang out with you and enjoy that wonderful season because, yeah, we have to celebrate in other ways, artificially, not through weather. We have our ways of celebrating, but what you're describing is just so wonderful. I love it. Now, specifically regarding Salem,
Hmm.
what are your, and this is probably a really tough question, but what are your absolute favorite things to do in Salem during October?
Yeah. So even though Salem is definitely spooky and Halloween town year round, there are certain things that only happen in October, right? Which is why everyone comes. One of my top favorite things to experience is our Halloween parade, just because, unlike other towns, it starts at the beginning of the month as opposed to the end of the month. A lot of places have Halloween parades closer to the end, but ours is a kickoff to the season, right? So we have it right at the beginning, and this is the official start of spooky season in Salem. And it's just so special because it's not like, a big city type parade. We have like the high school kids and our locals and we can march in the parade. So even though Salem is a pretty, fairly sized city, it still feels very like small town community, which is very endearing and quaint little New England town, which I love so much. That's always really special. I would say like my favorite thing to do outside of like a tour or an activity is really just wake up early in the morning and like get a cup of coffee and walk down Essex Street and feel the energy of the people and the excitement. Like, I don't know if a lot of locals don't like tourists. I feel like I'm different in that sense because I love tourists. I love seeing how excited they are. I love their happiness. I love the energy. It was the same way in Sleepy Hollow. It was amazing to see people coming and like putting their shirts over their head and pretending to be the headless horseman and taking pictures by tombs. And it just gives your heart such joy. So pretty much one of my favorite things is just walking up and down Essex and just taking all of this in and experiencing it.
Oh, it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned tours and things like that. So, for somebody visiting Salem for the first time, can you describe things like haunted happenings or any other tours? What hidden gems or must-see spots do you recommend?
So, like, you can approach Salem a few different ways. There's people that come just for Halloween, and they're like, the history is kind of to the side, And then there's people like me who started coming like just for the history, and then the Halloween was the bonus. So, when you come to Salem, I always urge people to like stop by the Witch Trials Memorial. And like, no matter what kind of person you are, like, you could be the biggest Halloweeniac in the world, and you're always going to have so much fun doing. The trolley is amazing. The night tours are amazing. We have this huge store called Blackcraft that has like this gigantic witch hanging from the ceiling. Seeing stuff like that is like, whoa, all of this is amazing. They have a haunt in the back that is one of the most beautiful haunts aesthetically that I've ever walked through because it's just so gorgeous. So all of those things are fabulous, but you want to spend time at the Witch Trials Memorial and just kind of like remember why all of this kind of exists and why we're here and why this place is what it is. As far as hidden gems, I personally love going to Danvers next door, which is where the hysteria actually started. So, this is probably more for like people who go there for history lovers, but there's so many tourists that I talk to. They seem to find me somehow and ask me questions like in the cemetery. And as soon as I mention Danvers or where the hysteria started or this or that, they have a look on their face like, oh, I didn't even know that that existed. So, as far as hidden gems go, Danvers is a big one for me.
Wonderful. Now, can you describe and or talk about Bora and who Bora is?
Yeah, Bora is fabulous. We love Bora. So she's kind of like our local witch. So we do have an official witch of Salem who is Lori Cabot, and she's been our witch since the 1970s. She's kind of like started the modern Wiccan witch movement in Salem that brought all of that about. But Bora is fantastic. She dresses head to toe like the typical Halloween witch, the green face, right, and the hat and the raggy clothes, and she's got the voice to go along with it. And she's made such a name for herself that a lot of places you go to in Salem, in the Halloween Museum, you're going to find a life-size statue of Bora. In Blackcraft, you're going to find Bora t-shirts, Bora coffee. Uh, she likes to go on reality shows once in a while. She travels all around. She does weddings, which I know she's probably getting very busy, like spooky season is coming. So yeah, she's a fantastic addition to Salem. It's always so much fun to walk down Essex and run into Bora because you could see her coming from a mile away and you know it's going to be a good interaction.
Thank you for that. Now, switching gears a little bit to Sleepy Hollow.
Mm.
It has its own haunting charm. What are your top recommendations for visitors looking to experience its eerie side?
Yeah, as far as Sleepy Hollow goes, you definitely want to go in October. That's the height of their season. Throughout the year, Sleepy Hollow's pretty tame. You have little hints of spookiness here and there. You're going to see the Headless Horseman logo on everything. That's amazing. But Halloween is the time that you want to go. You definitely want to do a walkthrough of the cemetery at night. They do these wonderful lantern tours, and there's some really cool burials in that cemetery. There's murderers and very historic figures. Like there's a little world outside of the Headless Horseman, but there's really nothing quite like walking through Sleepy Hollow Cemetery at night with a lantern in your hand, and you kind of like feel that spooky presence like creeping up on you through the woods. It's really cool. You want to do that, and you want to do the Jonathan Kruk storytelling. He's our master storyteller in Sleepy Hollow. And he retells the legend of Sleepy Hollow every October at Sunnyside, which is where Washington Irving lived. And at the end, you have the Headless Horseman galloping up behind him, and you have like an orange light shining on Washington Irving's home. So it's a theatrical experience. It's an autumn night experience. You get to see the Headless Horseman. Sunnyside is very haunted too, so to speak. So it's a very all-around spooky experience.
I want to do that so bad. That sounds
Oh,
amazing.
good.
So I am one of the folks that you are describing. I know there are Halloween folks and there's history folks. I'm both. And so that's what I really loved a lot about visiting Salem. But
Yeah.
some folks may not fully understand the importance of Salem's history. Why, to you, is it so important to honor and preserve the history of the Salem witch trials?
Well, like all history, without knowing it, it's doomed to repeat itself, right? So we always want to remember because these people tend to forget that these were real people, through media, through things like The Crucible or, Salem Show on Fox Network or whatever it was on, and through the heightened state of Halloween that Salem has become. And I don't blame people for this. It's easy to forget that these were real people that existed, that suffered, that underwent horrible conditions and, just stood by the truth and died for these things. So like it kind of brings you back down to earth a little bit. And you have to remember that they existed because, this happened. This was a really important part of history. And I mean, it's happening today, right? People are, being scapegoated and outcasts and stuff like that. So we always want to remember this. That's why I always, like I said before, ask people to just take a little time to remember what happened here, you know?
Completely,
Yeah,
completely agree with you. It's
yeah,
chilling,
it
and
is.
thank you for sharing that. Now, for folks, well, like me, who are outside of your region
Mhm.
and outside of Salem and Sleepy Hollow, what
Yeah.
are three must-see New England spots to celebrate the Halloween season?
New England is all around incredible for Halloween, right? I feel like it's almost like the heartbeat of Halloween in terms of like America. I know other states have amazing things, but we get that fall, right? So this year I'm actually going for the first time to Haunted Overload, which I think I
Mhm.
mentioned to you. It is just from everything I've seen and heard from everyone that's gone, it's out of this world experience. They have a daytime haunt that you can walk through that you could just see how, these beautiful creations. And then they have it, at nighttime, it becomes really scary. So there's definitely that. I feel like that is a must do in New England. Another town, like, I'm all about Halloween towns, and another town that's on the rise is Old Weathersfield in Connecticut. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. So it was the site of, a couple of like, witch accusations and whatnot. The book, The Witch of Blackbird Pond, was written based on that. So they're starting to like, I see this incline of Old Weathersfield, just pumpkins everywhere, fall festivals, a lot of spooky night tours, gorgeous old New England cemeteries. They have practical magic type stuff going on throughout the year. So they're really on the rise as far as like Halloween events. And I would say for a third, like you have to check out a pumpkin festival because we seem to have a lot of those. Keene has a major pumpkin festival. I think there's one in Rhode Island that's incredible. There's a website called Halloween New England. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And you can go to this website and it has every hayride, every haunt, every pumpkin festival, every Halloween parade, all throughout New England. You can do it by state. You could do it by like level of scare, if it's family friendly or if you want to go to like an extreme haunt. So yeah, New England really just is like the place to experience Halloween. Like you have to go to a small town in New England and just walk around and like take this in, you know?
I want to take the whole month off, the whole month of October, just hang out over there. Now, what are a couple of surprising or lesser known facts about Salem that most people may not know about?
Yeah, I think one of them I think I already mentioned a little bit was as far as history goes, the witch hysteria did not start where you come to Salem. So when you go to Salem today, Essex Street and all the middle of all that, it didn't start there. It was brought there later on. So the hysteria started in a town next to it called Danvers. And back in the day, that was called Salem Village. And the Salem we know today is Salem Town. So there was two kinds of Salems. So the hysteria started in Salem Village for quite a while until the trials were then brought to Salem Town, which is present day Salem. So a lot of people don't even know, like, oh, there's this whole other area that I can go to, and I could see the archaeological site where the minister's house was, where it's ground zero for witch hysteria, which is really cool. The house itself doesn't exist, but they found the foundation in the 1970s. So you can literally walk down the cellar steps and stand in like, the foundation of this house. And this is where it all started. It's where Tituba lived. It's where Samuel Parris, who is the minister, lived. And the two girls, Abigail and Betty, first started having fits. That was where it happened. So, to me, as a Salem historian, nothing gets better than experiencing that, going there at any time of the year and just standing there and being like, this is where, like, you feel it. You really definitely feel it. Um,
Wow. That's so
Yeah.
fascinating. Wow.
And we still have, let me add, we still have the tavern right down the road from the minister's house where all the magistrates used to meet. The girls used to throw themselves on the floor and have fits. Tituba's husband, John Indian, worked there. He used to have fits there. And then the meeting house was down the road. So there's these three little, it's kind of like a holy trinity of Salem witch trials. And that house still exists. The tavern still exists. It was recently being threatened to be demolished, and we saved it. So now it's going to be saved, which was a really big deal.
Wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. Wow. This is all so fascinating. Now, if you could debunk one myth or misconception about Salem or the witch trials, what would it be?
I have a lot, but I think as much as I love Arthur Miller and The Crucible, I think he kind of did a number on Salem myths because, when I'm walking around, I hear people talking about the witch trials. I hear people saying, like, how many witches were burned at the stake? No witches were burned at the stake. Probably the biggest one is these people weren't witches at all. They were Puritans, but we refer to them as witches, like very, casually, because it's just like what they've kind of become. And I think my number one would probably be like John Proctor did not have an affair with Abigail Williams, just because I hear so many people saying that, like, well, he got what he deserved because he had an affair. And it's like, no, this was all fabrication of Arthur Miller's imagination. So we kind of want to like bring it back to the truth. But that's why it's good to like go on tours and get a lot of like the historic truth.
So, one last final fun question for you is what forgotten piece of Halloween pop culture do you wish got its own reboot or documentary?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm like an 80s baby, so I feel like I grew up in like the best time of Halloween. Like I'm all about vintage nostalgia Halloween. So if I had to think about it, I would say I would really love to see Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree get like a major motion picture, but done well, right? Like anytime us 80s kids hear like something's going to be redone, we're immediately like, oh, it's going to be horrible, right? But I think The Halloween Tree is so amazing, and it's such a part of like my pop culture type Halloween childhood that I would really love to see that either a documentary or like a movie done really well. I would love to see that.
Oh, I would love to see that so much. I love the cartoon, but I think a good director could bring it to life in a wonderful way.
I agree.
Danny, thank you so much. Where can people find you and follow along on your adventures in Salem and the New England area?
Yeah, so I'm mostly on Instagram these days, and my page is just Dani October. And it's kind of like the history and happenings of Salem. I talk a lot about Salem history, but it's also like a side of Halloween. Probably starting in the spring, I'm going to start doing my own personal tours because I just could talk Salem history all day, and it's just my favorite thing on earth to do. And I also have the Queen of Halloween on Facebook. That's mostly on Facebook. And that's just fun. That's less history and that's just fun Halloween nostalgia all year round.
Danny, thank you so, so much for working the fright shift. Thank you again, Fear Architect Dani October, for keeping that lantern lit within the darkness. Now let's step into the haunts and memories I've studied and how they guide my storytelling path inside Echoes of the Past.
Echoes of the past. The origins of scare experiences.
This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. The rise of the professional haunted attraction industry in the United States. From humble charity fundraisers to multi-million-dollar productions, haunted houses have become a cornerstone of Halloween culture. And I've had the privilege of watching some of that transformation up close, and I'm guessing some of you have watched it too. Now, going way back in time, during the Victorian era, There were phantasmagoria shows with a magic lantern, which was a projection trick before electricity, and people thought that they were actually seeing images of deceased relatives. And eventually, those ideas mixed with the macabre darkness of wax museums, and things really started to roll. But going into the early 20th century, the ideas really picked up. While the idea of haunted spaces has existed for centuries, the first known commercial haunted house that I could locate emerged in 1915 in Liphook, England. That haunted house is widely recognized as the first recorded purpose-built haunted attraction. It was known as the Orton and Spooner Ghost House, and it was more like a carnival-style funhouse than like the narrative-driven haunts that we know today. But what made it unique was that it was powered by steam, a marvel of its time, and it featured mechanical illusions and theatrical effects designed to thrill and disorient guests. The Ghost House was part of the Hollycombe Steam Collection, a historic fairground and steam museum that still exists today. The attraction used moving floors, creepy lighting, and sound effects to create a scary atmosphere, essentially laying the groundwork for the haunted experiences that would follow decades later. What's remarkable is how this early 20th century attraction captured the public's imagination and helped establish the haunted house as a form of entertainment. Not just folklore like ghost stories, it bridged the gap between Victorian phantasmagorias and seances and ghost stories to modern horror experiences, and it showed that fear could be fun and profitable. And if we're tracing the lineage of haunted attractions, and from my research, the Orton and Spooner Ghost House is the great-grandparent of them all. But it wasn't until the Great Depression that haunted houses began to take root in American soil. Communities desperate to curb Halloween vandalism organized creepy walkthroughs in basements and community centers. These early haunts were crude. Think the peeled grapes for eyeballs and spaghetti for guts, that kind of thing, but they planted the seeds for something much bigger. In the 1950s, several resources point to Southern California as a hotspot of early haunted houses, particularly the San Mateo Haunted House presented by the Children's Health Home Junior Auxiliary that opened in 1957 and ran a Halloween event for 20 seasons. The San Bernardino Assistance League Haunted House opened in 1958 and became sponsored in 1960 by the Junior Women's Club. These are some very early examples. Well, if we fast forward to 1969 and Disneyland's Haunted Mansion opens its creaky doors. Now, I know I'm just jumping around and I'm not going to ignore dark rides and fun houses, but that's for another time. But the Haunted Mansion, this attraction was a game changer because it proved that haunted experiences could be immersive, theatrical, incredible production value, and most importantly, profitable. So it wasn't long before others took notice. Enter campus life haunted houses. In the 1960s, Youth for Christ's Campus Life program began organizing haunted houses as a way to engage teenagers and raise funds. These weren't your average neighborhood haunts. These were elaborate, scary walkthroughs. By the 1970s, campus life haunts had exploded in popularity, popping up in gymnasiums, abandoned buildings, and even shopping malls. By 1972, there were over 80 campus life haunted houses in the United States. They were often staffed by volunteers, students, parents who poured their creativity into crafting scenes that were scary. Around the same time, another juggernaut was sweeping the country, the JC's Haunted Houses. The Junior Chamber of Commerce, or JC's, began producing haunted houses as community fundraisers in the early 1970s, but they had been involved with Halloween going back to at least the 1930s, and eventually began creating these haunted houses. These haunts were everywhere, small towns, big cities, you name it. They were often often housed in old warehouses or community centers and became annual traditions. The JC's model was simple but effective. Low overhead, high community involvement, and a whole lot of heart. They trained generations of haunters, many of whom went on to launch their own attractions. By the late 1980s, the haunted attraction industry was booming. The publication of the Haunted House Handbook in 1972 gave aspiring haunters a blueprint for success. And by the end of the decade, there were hundreds of haunts operating across the country, like the March of Dimes, which got in on the action in the 1980s. Their haunted houses, like the one operated by Purdue University's Eta Kappa Nu chapter from 1982 to 1985, they combined scares with service. These events raised money for medical research while giving college students a creative outlet and a crash course in logistics, marketing, and crowd control. And nowadays, with the professional work I do for Halloween theme park events, well, we stand on the shoulders of these incredible attractions. Outside the theme parks, I've worked closely with some amazing independent professional haunts like my friends over at Hobbs Grove in Central California, and of course, the big team at 13th Floor Entertainment Group. I believe they're the largest haunted house company in the United States, maybe even the world. They have dozens of attractions nationwide with a level of professionalism that would have blown away the people running these things back in the 1970s. And speaking of numbers, I have some stats for you. As of today, and well, based on my research, there are over 1,200 professional haunted houses operating in the United States every October, along with 300 theme parks hosting Halloween events and more than 3,000 charity-run haunts. That's thousands of attractions, millions of visitors, and billions of dollars spent on fear. But beyond the economics, haunted houses have had a profound cultural impact. They've become a rite of passage, a shared experience, a way for communities to come together and celebrate the creepy, scary side of life. They've influenced everything from horror films to immersive theater to escape rooms, and they've shaped my career in ways I could have never imagined. So the next time you walk through a haunted house, whether it's a high-tech spectacle or a home haunt, remember that you are part of a legacy. A legacy built by volunteers, visionaries, and a whole lot of fake blood. And if you listen closely, you might just hear all their screams hiding inside the echoes of the past. And just like that, our shift comes to a close. Huge thanks to our fear architect, Dani October. Within these stories is the blueprint of fear itself, how we face it, how it transforms us, how we create it, and sometimes how it sets us free. If you liked what you heard, do us a favor and tell a friend to tell a friend. Give us a good review, 5 stars, and help spread the word. Thanks for spending your nightmares with us. I'm your host, Ted Doherty. Beast wishes, and until we meet again, it's officially time to clock out of Working the Fright Shift. Working the Fright Shift is written and produced by Ted Doherty. No portion of this recording may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written and express permission of the producer. All opinions expressed in this recording are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the views of the producer or affiliates. For more details, visit www.workingthefrightshift.com. Copyright 2025, Ted Doherty. All rights reserved.